Welcome to our channel, Hollywood Movie Review. Wicked, for Good, 2024, Movie Review. Wicked, for Good, also known as Wicked, Part 2 is a 2025 musical fantasy film directed by Jon M and written by Winnie Halsman and Dana Fox. The sequel to Wicked, 2024, it adapts the second act of the 2003 stage musical by Stephen Schwartz and Halsman, which was loosely based on Gregory Maguire's 1995 novel, a reimagining of L. Frank Baum's 1900 novel The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and its 1939 film adaptation. Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, Jonathan Bailey, Ethan Slater, Bowen Yang, Michelle Yeoh, and Jeff Goldblum reprised their roles from the first film. Set in the land of Oz before and during the events of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the film follows Elphaba and Glinda in their new respective identities as the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda the Good. Universal Pictures and Marc Platt, who both produced the stage musical, announced the film adaptation in 2012. After a long development and multiple delays, partly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Chu was hired to direct, with Erivo and Grande cast in 2021. The adaptation was split into two parts to avoid omitting plot points and further develop the characters. Principal photography on both films began in December 2022 in England, was interrupted in July 2023 by the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike, and resumed and concluded in January 2024. Wicked, for Good premiered at the Suhai Music Hall in Sao Paulo on November 4, 2025, and was released in the United States on November 21. It grossed $540 million on a $150 million budget, becoming the second highest-grossing US film and musical film adaptation, both behind the first film. 10. Both the National Board of Review and the American Film Institute listed it among the top 10 films of 2025, and it received several accolades, including nominations for 5 Golden Globe Awards and 2 British Academy Film Awards. Sometime after defying the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Elphaba Throp, now branded as the Wicked Witch of the West by Madame Morrible, continues battling for animal rights from a forest hideout. Glinda Upland, now the wizard's spokesperson, is engaged to Fiyero Tigalar, now captain of the Gale Force. As Oz celebrates the grand opening of the Yellow Brick Road, Fiyero reveals he is attempting to locate Elphaba, though Glinda insists Elphaba does not want to be found. Elphaba encounters some animals leaving Oz, including her former caretaker Dulcibert, and encourages them to fight against the wizard. The cowardly lion dissuades them, blaming Elphaba for freeing him from his cage as a cub, the only home he had known, and exposing her as the reason for the wizard's flying monkey spies. Elphaba visits her sister Nessarose, who has inherited their father's governorship of Munchkinland. Nessarose prohibits the Munchkins, including her servant Bok, from leaving without her approval. Elphaba enchants Nessarose's shoes, giving her the ability to fly. Bok, deciding Nessarose no longer needs him because of this and having learned of Glinda and Fiyero's wedding, tries to leave Nessarose. She casts a love spell from the Grimoire, but it backfires, shrinking his heart. Elphaba's attempt to save him turns him into a Tin Man. Elphaba returns to the Emerald City, where Glinda implores her to join the wizard. She accepts under the condition that the flying monkeys be freed. Chistery, one of the monkeys, reveals several animals imprisoned within the wizard's lair, including Dr. Dillamont, who has lost his ability to speak. Reaffirming her resolve to fight the wizard, Elphaba frees the animals, interrupting Fiyero and Glinda's wedding. Fiyero helps Elphaba escape and joins her. Concluding that they are having an affair, Glinda vengefully suggests that the wizard and Morrible lure out Elphaba by spreading a rumor that Nessarose is in trouble. At their hideout, Elphaba and Fiyero profess mutual love. He suggests that she should go to an abandoned castle, Kiamoko, for shelter. Morrible, realizing a simple rumor would not fool Elphaba, creates a tornado that brings a house from Kansas that fatally crushes Nessarose. Glinda gives Nessarose's shoes to the house's occupant, Dorothy Gale, and directs her to the wizard, promising that he can help her return home. A fight begins between Glinda and Elphaba before the Gale Force arrives. Fiyero intervenes and holds back the guards by threatening to kill Glinda, who finally accepts that he loves Elphaba. While the guards drag Fiyero into a field and savagely beat him as punishment, Elphaba escapes with the monkeys to Kiamoko, where she casts a spell to save Fiero's life. Believing she has failed, and lamenting all her previous failed attempts to do right, she decides to embrace her perceived wickedness. Dorothy, alongside Bok, the lion, and a scarecrow, meets the wizard, who instructs them to kill Elphaba and bring him her broom. Bok rallies the citizens of the Emerald City against Elphaba, Lamenting that her public image is built on lies, Glinda confronts Morble about the tornado, but Morble rebuffs her. Glinda rushes to Kyamoko to warn Elphaba about the mob. Elphaba kidnaps Dorothy and imprisons her to retrieve the shoes just as Glinda arrives. After Chistery informs them of Fiero's apparent death, Elphaba decides to surrender, imploring Glinda to withhold the truth from the people and entrusting her with the Grimiri. They reaffirm their friendship in a tearful farewell. Glinda hides and watches in horror as Dorothy douses Elphaba with a bucket of water, seemingly melting her. Having regained speech, Chistery gives Glinda the green elixir bottle that belonged to Elphaba's mother. She brings it to the wizard, who realizes that he is Elphaba's biological father and the reason for her power. Ashamed of his actions, he leaves Oz at Glinda's demand. Glinda directs the monkeys to apprehend and arrest Morble for her crimes. She finishes telling her story to the Munchkins and re-establishes rights for the animals, who get their voices back. The Scarecrow, revealed to be Fiero, transformed by Elphaba's spell, returns to Kyamoko and finds Elphaba hiding under a trapdoor, having faked her death to protect Glinda's reputation. Elphaba and Fiero depart us through the surrounding desert while the Grimiri opens for Glinda. A film adaptation of the Broadway musical Wicked was announced in 2012, with scheduled release dates of December 20th, 2019, December 22nd, 2021, December 25th, 2024, and November 27, 2024. After numerous delays, the first film was released on November 22, 2024. In April 2022, director Jon M. announced that the adaptation would be split in two parts, saying, "As we prepared the production over the last year, it became impossible to wrestle the story of Wicked into a single film without doing some real damage to it. As we tried to cut songs or trim characters, those decisions began to feel like fatal compromises to the source material that has entertained us all for so many years. We decided to give ourselves a bigger canvas and make not just one Wicked movie but two. With more space, we can tell the story of Wicked as it was meant to be told while bringing even more depth and surprise to the journeys for these beloved characters." Stephen Schwartz echoed Chu's sentiment in June, while also confirming that a new song was in the works for one of the two films. "We found it very difficult to get past Defying Gravity without a break. That song is written specifically to bring a curtain down, and whatever scene to follow it without a break just seemed hugely anticlimactic. Even as a very long single movie, it required us cutting or omitting things that we wanted to include and that we think fans of the show and the story will appreciate. What we have discussed is that changes need to be additive, to use producer Marc Platt's term. They need to add something to the story or the characters. They can't just be changes to do something different. I feel confident that by the time the movie is made, if we all continue to have the same degree of input, I could have a conversation with anyone who has a question about any of the changes made from the stage show and justify why I think it's better for the movie." In November 2022, Schwartz said the film would include two new songs to meet the demands of the storytelling. In December 2024, Chu said the film would have a darker tone and that the character of Dorothy Gale would have a more prominent role compared to the musical. Principal photography began alongside Wicked on December 9, 2022, and had nearly finished by July 2023 before production was suspended due to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. Filming resumed and concluded in January 2024. The song vocals were recorded live on set at the insistence of Erivo and Grande, with production sound mixer Simon Hayes using a variation of the same recording techniques he implemented on Les Miserables. Christopher Scott choreographed the musical numbers. Chu cited Steven Spielberg's 1991 film Hook as inspiration for the large-scale sets and practical effects, including 9 million colorful tulips planted on location to surround the Munchkinland set and a yellow brick road paved with real mud. Many sets from Wicked were repurposed in Wicked for Good, such as the life-size train to Emerald City doubling as Glinda's personal locomotive, and the governor's mansion in Munchkinland using elements of Shiz University's library and Madame Morble's office. Chu also cited the 1998 films Pleasantville and The Truman Show as influences on how Wicked and Wicked for Good thematically portray the land of Oz, saying, "It helps create this idea of the rebelliousness that this new younger generation are discovering." How far will that take everybody in Oz throughout the course of the whole story of both movies? It's an awakening of a generation. You start to see the truth about things that maybe you were taught differently. Buck's transformation into the Tin Man was a collaboration between production designer Nathan Crowley, costume designer Paul Tazewell, and prosthetic makeup designer Marc Coulier. The 11-piece prosthetic set took 4 hours to apply to Ethan Slater's face and was designed in homage to Jack Haley's portrayal of the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, with minimal VFX work used to simulate the Tin Man's joints. The design of the Scarecrow, in contrast, deviates from Ray Bolger's portrayal in The Wizard of Oz by retaining much of Jonathan Bailey's likeness, including the removal of his blue eye contacts as Fiyero in favor of his natural brown eye color. Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, and Framestore provided the visual effects for Wicked, for Good, with Pablo Hellman serving as the production visual effects supervisor. On February 6, 2024, it was confirmed that post-production work was in progress, with Chu working remotely with editor Myron Kirstein via the newly released Apple Vision Pro. Editing was paused during most of 2024 so that Chu could finish post-production on Wicked and figure out how Wicked, for Good would continue the story. Post-production resumed in November 2024, following the press tour and release of Wicked, with editing done through Avid Media Composer. On December 16, 2024, the title was revealed as Wicked, for Good, sharing its subtitle with the name of the musical's penultimate song. Chu defended the title as always having been the right choice over the working title, Wicked, Part 2, though the latter was retained on certain international releases. The soundtrack album for Wicked, for Good was released on November 21, 2025, through Republic and Verve Records. The score album was released on December 5, 2025. As with Wicked, Schwartz composed the score alongside John Powell, who conducted the score cues with Gavin Greenaway. Jeff Atmagian updated William David Braun's original orchestrations for the songs and enlarged the orchestra from the stage version's original 23 musicians to 125. The song cues were conducted by original music director Stephen Oremus. Schwartz, Oremus, and Greg Wells served as the soundtrack's producers. In January 2025, Wells revealed that he and Atmagian were in the process of recording live instrumentals, with recordings scheduled to happen in May or June 2025 with the orchestra at Air Studios, followed by mixing over the subsequent months. Later that month, a home studio belonging to Wells was destroyed in the 2025 Palisades fire, halting production. New scenes depict Elphaba's efforts to liberate the animals, some of whom are constructing the yellow brick road under forced labor or are escaping us to regions unknown. She sings "No Place Like Home" to convince them to stay, only for the cowardly lion to appear and reveal that Elphaba gave the flying monkeys their wings. Before the Wicked Witch of the East, Bok attempts to leave Munchkinland but is prevented by a decree from Nessarose that prohibits animals and munchkins from leaving the region, whereas in the musical, he only mentions to Elphaba about Nessarose stripping the munchkins of their rights. The Wicked Witch of the East is also revised to remove its ableist implications, with Nessarose's resentment over her disability changed to her remorse over her relationship with Bok. Instead of being able to walk upright, Nessarose now flies in the air after Elphaba enchants her shoes. Before confronting the wizard in the Emerald City, Elphaba reunites with Glinda. The latter accompanies the wizard during Wonderful, which features revised lyrics and a reprise of Defying Gravity. Afterward, Elphaba discovers an entire room filled with captive animals, which plays against Glinda and Fiyero's wedding procession. As she descends further down, she finds Dr. Dillamond caged and unable to speak. Her outrage breaks the animals out of their cages, who stampede through the ceremony as they flee. The tornado created by Madame Morrible is depicted on screen, with Nessarose searching for Bok in the storm before Dorothy's house crushes her. Dorothy and Toto also appear on screen, including their departure from Munchkinland, initial meeting with the wizard, confrontation with Elphaba, and the launching of the hot air balloon. Dorothy's face is never clearly shown, and she doesn't encounter Elphaba in Munchkinland or on the yellow brick road. While Elphaba follows the tornado back to Munchkinland, Fiyero comes across the flying monkeys and allies with them. The monkeys join him in freeing Elphaba from the gale force, then accompany her to Kiamo Co. March of the Witch Hunters is split into two sections, with Glinda singing The Girl in the Bubble in between before she confronts Morrible. After For Good, Glinda readmits the animals into Ozian society in a continuation of her speech from the start of Wicked. She does not remain in Munchkinland for a Wicked Good finale, instead visiting the tower where Elphaba first flew west. At the end of the song, the Grimary activates for Glinda, and the final shot of the film features her whispering in Elphaba's ear, recreating the Broadway poster. Work-in-process footage from both films and the adaptation was presented at CinemaCon on April 26, 2023. The 60-second teaser trailer for Wicked, which premiered during Super Bowl 58 on February 11, 2024, featured brief scenes from Wicked for Good that expand the plot of the musical's second act, including clips of Glinda's wedding and the wizard sending Dorothy and her traveling party to hunt Elphaba down. In February 2025, Chu revealed that the Wicked for Good theatrical trailer would premiere sometime in the spring or early summer, after technical difficulties with the visual effects prevented it from airing during Super Bowl 59. The 2-minute trailer premiered at CinemaCon on April 2, introduced on stage by Erivo, Grande, Chu and Platt. It was publicly released on June 4, 2025, attached to a one-night theatrical re-release of Wicked, before premiering online afterwards. Simultaneously, the Shiz University website introduced in the first film's promotional campaign was updated, replacing links to the college's locations with an audio recording of Madame Morble's propaganda speech against Elphaba, and a ticker tape urging visitors to report any suspicious witch activity to Morble and the wizard. Dr. Dillamon's classroom page was also updated to replace the lecture of Oz's history on the chalkboard with the phrase "animals should be seen and not heard," a reference to the character's fate in the first film. On June 9, Universal reported that the Wicked for Good trailer received 113 million views in its first 24 hours, surpassing the 75 million views made in the same timeframe by its predecessor. That same day, an episode of LEGO Masters with challenges themed to Wicked aired on Fox in the United States as part of the series' 5th season. On August 6, a first-look featurette was released, containing behind-the-scenes footage and interviews with Chu, Erivo, and Grande on the evolution between the two Wicked films. A final theatrical trailer was released on September 24, 2025. On television, the 10th season of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars featured a Wicked challenge in its 7th episode, where contestants worked in pairs to design outfits with a relevant backstory. Erivo and Grande sat on the panel as guest judges. For the 6th week of its 34th season, Dancing with the Stars held a Wicked night where couples danced to songs from Wicked and Wicked for Good. Chu appeared as a guest judge, while Erivo, Grande, Jonathan Bailey, and Michelle Yeoh appeared in pre-recorded greetings. The episode included a new clip from the wonderful performance. A musical television special, Wicked, One Wonderful Night, aired on NBC on November 6, featuring the cast and special guests performing songs from Wicked and Wicked for Good live from the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles. An encore presentation of the special aired on December 31. Wicked was shown on NBC on November 19, 2025. Universal's direct global promotional efforts for Wicked for Good were scaled back from the first film, with a $90 million budget, compared to the $150 million budget for Wicked. However, the second film had over 400 brand partners for international marketing, with $330 million in media value, the second largest spend ever, just shy of the record-breaking $350 million from marketing partners for the first film. Wicked for Good was screened privately at the DJ Theater in Manhattan, New York on October 27, 2025, with Grande, Chu, Platt, Schwartz, and members of the Broadway cast in attendance. 84. Two private screenings were held in London on November 9, one for members of the musical's West End production, and another for BAFTA voters that was followed by a discussion with members of the film crew, including cinematographer Alice Brooks and production designer Nathan Crowley. Wicked for Good premiered in Sao Paulo at the Suhai Music Hall on November 4, 2025, with subsequent premieres in Paris at Le Grand Rex on November 7, London at Cineworld Leicester Square on November 10, Singapore at Universal Studios Singapore on November 13, and Manhattan, New York at the Metropolitan Opera House on November 17. It was theatrically released by Universal Pictures in the United States on November 21, 2025, with engagements in RealD 3D, IMAX, Dolby Cinema, 4DX, ScreenX, and D-Box. 91. It was previously scheduled for release on November 26, 2025, and December 25, 2025, before being moved up to avoid competition with Zootopia 2 and Avatar, Fire and Ash, respectively. Advanced screenings took place on November 17, 2025, for Amazon Prime subscribers, and on November 20 for the general public. A one-time double feature of Wicked and Wicked for Good was also released in select theaters on the latter date. Wicked for Good was released on video on demand on December 30, 2025, in the United States. It was released on 4K Blu-ray, and DVD on January 20, 2026, by Universal Pictures Home Entertainment. On January 1, 2026, Wicked for Good became available to purchase or rent through Roku devices, with bonus features such as a dance performance of Wonderful and a choir rendition of For Good by the Musica Children's Choir. On February 9, 2026, it was announced that Wicked for Good would stream on Peacock beginning March 20, 2026, followed by Netflix on July 20. Tickets for Wicked for Good went on sale on October 8, 2025. The following day, Fandango announced that it was the site's best first-day ticket pre-seller of 2025, surpassing Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, the movie, Infinity Castle, Taylor Swift, the official release party of A Showgirl, and Superman. It additionally became the biggest PG-rated first-day ticket pre-seller of all time, ahead of Frozen 2, the 2019 remake of The Lion King, and the sing-along version of K-pop Demon Hunters, and entered the top 10 best first-day ticket pre-sellers of all time on Fandango. Jeremy Hainline, EVP of Fandango Ticketing, said, "With last year's Wicked breaking records and captivating audiences around the world, it is no surprise that fans are racing to get their tickets to Wicked for Good." The first film became a true cultural phenomenon, bringing new generations into the world of Wicked, and it's clear that fans can't wait to see how the story continues on the big screen. Deadline Hollywood projected the film to gross $112 to $115 million in its domestic opening weekend, on par with the $112.5 million opening gross of the first film, while Variety projected an opening weekend as high as $150 to $180 million. Wicked for Good has grossed $342.9 million in the United States and Canada, and $197.4 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $540.3 million. In the United States and Canada, it made $69.1 million on its opening day, which included $30.8 million from preview showings in the week leading up to its release, $6.1 million on Monday, $6.5 million on Wednesday, and $18.2 million on Thursday. Its box office previews were the biggest of the year, surpassing The Fantastic Four: First Steps, $24.4 million. The film topped the domestic and international box offices with grosses of $147 million and $223 million, respectively, surpassing its predecessor to earn the highest opening weekend for a Broadway adaptation. It also ranked as the second biggest opening of 2025 behind a Minecraft movie, $162.8 million, the third biggest opening for a Universal film behind Jurassic World, $208.8 million, and Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, $148 million, the second biggest pre-Thanksgiving debut behind The Hunger Games: Catching Fire, $158 million, and the third biggest opening for a musical film behind the remakes of The Lion King, $191.8 million, and Beauty and the Beast, $174.8 million. In its second weekend, Wicked for Good grossed $62.8 million, and a total of $93 million over the 5-day Thanksgiving frame, dropping 57% and finishing second behind newcomer Zootopia 2. During its third weekend, the film fell to third place, grossing $17.3 million behind Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and Zootopia 2. While initial reviews indicated that Wicked for Good was positively received upon release, later assessments leaned towards a mixed response that was considerably less enthusiastic than the first film. Critics generally praised the performances of the cast, particularly that of Grande and Erivo, the production design, and costuming, but took issue with the direction, pacing, and connections back to the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 66% of 354 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 6.5/10. The website's consensus reads, "Taking one last lap down the yellow brick road, Wicked for Good's darker tone and unhurried pacing sometimes get in the way, but this epic conclusion ultimately brings Elphaba and Glinda's story home in rousing fashion." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 58 out of 100, based on 60 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale, same score as the first film, while those surveyed by PostTrack gave it a 92% overall positive score, with 82% saying they would definitely recommend it. Early reactions deemed Wicked for Good superior to the first film and the second act of the stage musical, with Chu's direction and the performances of Erivo and Grande lauded. Kevin Marr, in a 4-star out of 5 review for The Times, felt the movie surpasses last year's box office smash in verve, ambition and emotional ache, but highlighted several sluggish moments and less impactful musical numbers, such as The Girl in the Bubble and For Good. Johnny Oleksinski of the New York Post lamented the tonal imbalance caused by splitting the musical into 2 films, but found the darker and grimmer Act 2 to offer a far more compelling narrative, with improved character arcs for Elphaba and Glinda compared to the bright and poppy YA boarding school story from the first film. In a negative review, Justin Chang of The New Yorker stated that the film is so cowed by its iconic predecessor, the 1939 Wizard of Oz and the stage musical, that instead of building authentically, it reacts with destructiveness, almost a petulant attempt to outdo what came before. Donald Clark of the Irish Times gave the film a rating of 2 out of 5, stating that if you bought the first film's brash visual aesthetic, the result of a giant toddler vomiting candy floss all over Walt Disney World, then you will be relieved to discover it has got no less stomach unsettling. In contrast to the 10 Academy Award nominations and 2 wins earned by Wicked at the 97th ceremony, Wicked for Good failed to receive any nominations at the 98th ceremony, despite previously being shortlisted in 8 categories. As a result, Wicked for Good set a record for the largest drop in Oscar nominations compared to its predecessor last year. Part 1 of Wicked hit theaters and became an instant phenomenon. I hated it. Like, seriously, hated it. I think it's a really bad movie and you can read my review here. With that said, Part 2, Wicked for Good is actually not terrible. I mean, it's not great, but it's definitely better than the first half. And being a little better feels crazy positive. So here is my comparatively glowing review of a fairly basic, average at best, messy, mid-tier movie in Wicked for Good. After the nearly 3-hour unoriginal slog about school kids being mean in last year's Wicked, Wicked for Good actually has stuff happen and provides a little originality in how it creatively connects to the original perfection that is The Wizard of Oz. We left off with the show-stopping number, defying gravity, as Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, has her flying powers and is now trying to reveal the dark truth about the wonderful Wizard of Oz, played with Riley silliness from Jeff Goldblum. However, Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, and the Wizard have made powerless Glinda, Ariana Grande, the face of power, keeping the rhetoric that ugly is evil and Elphaba should be called the Wicked Witch of the West. Glinda and Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, are beginning to question these motives and intentions as they still want to help their friend Elphaba. Glinda, particularly, is seduced by this new power, love, and attention she is receiving from the people of Oz. Not to mention playing with her new flying bubble car. Everything is quickly coming to a head with an unsuspecting visit from a Kansas girl named Dorothy and her house dropping from the sky. With the exception of For Good and No Good Deed, a song I really enjoyed, the musical numbers in Wicked for Good are just not up to the powerful, catchy standards of Popular or Defying Gravity. But to be fair, I wasn't wowed by most of the songs from either film. While music in musicals are important, we are still watching a story in a film production. The art direction and costuming are all once again fabulous. The story is better, because there is action actually taking place. Sure, it's goofy action, but that's okay when you're taking ownership as a goofy popcorn movie rather than an important Oscar winner. And neither film is to that standard, and that's why my pushback is so hard when Wicked is being considered as high art. But the big difference is the pacing. Wicked for Good rushes through the story quickly, almost to a fault, with some storylines feeling abrupt. But that is a good thing by comparison, because Wicked just doesn't have enough meat on the bone as far as character, story, and overall quality worth dwelling upon. Let's just keep this light and fun, folks, and not try to make an epic-sized soap opera. At 2 hours and 18 minutes, Wicked for Good is nearly a half an hour shorter than its predecessor, which is a massive improvement. Both films could be cut shorter still though. In fact, both films should be chopped up, shedding 30 minutes from this one and an hour and a half from the first film. Put them both together to create a far more fast-paced, enjoyable story in one film that matches the length of the stage musical. I can think of so many unnecessary song numbers or moments that could easily be removed or shortened by just flagging each time I checked the time or desired to glance at my phone. Picture me whispering a secret in your ear saying like the book cover as I say, "It was a lot." I was lucky enough to bring my entire family to the PG-rated Wicked for Good screening. And for that, I am very thankful, because my kids really enjoyed it, which makes me love the experience. However, they too have notes. My 9-year-old son noticed a continuity issue for the Scarecrow character getting from one place to the next, while my daughter talked a lot about the abrupt turn of Elphaba's sister Nessarose, Marissa Bode, being labeled the Wicked Witch of the East, and the sudden physical love between two of the characters, which is simply cringe. And we all were a little irritated at the lazy trope of lazily writing characters who will not explain further when there is a misunderstanding as the catalyst for inciting conflict in the plot. "Just tell her that it's not true," is what my son yelled at the screen. If only it was that simple, my children. Wait, they're right. It is that simple. Nonetheless, we all enjoyed tying in the connections to our beloved, The Wizard of Oz visually. It was nice that the once famous ruby slippers were simply silver of presumed diamond mineral, so we can treat Wicked more as a reimagining of the story rather than an alternate point of view of the same story. Honestly, that is my only way to cope with toying with that beloved classic. Don't mess with a masterpiece. There are many changes in this respect, and it was fun playing detective, seeing how it all connects in ridiculous ways and what changes are made for our favorite characters in the Cowardly Lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow. My family actually had fun laughing about it. And in that sense, Wicked for Good is a fun, creative conclusion to the story. The two charismatic leads in Erivo and Grande are fantastic in these playful roles in a fairly beautiful, colorful production. These elements help the movie to be light entertainment, nothing more. It's just a shame you have to sit through so much bad, when there is a good movie worthy of the title buried in the unnecessary length of the two movies together. As it stands, perhaps minus the music, Wicked for Good is the better half. Approaching last year's Wicked from a neophyte perspective, I have, still, never read Gregory Maguire's book nor seen the musical by Stephen Schwartz and Winnie Halsman. I was surprised to discover how the story reframes the great and powerful Oz as an authoritarian figure in a dystopian fantasy. Oz, Jeff Goldblum, at his Goldblumiest, as we already knew, is a huckster and con artist who pretends to have true magic, despite only having a knack for gizmos. Throughout the 2024 film, he blames his realm's problems on talking animals. When Elphaba, an excellent Cynthia Erivo, learns of Oz's duplicity, the wizard turns her into a pariah, with his propaganda minister and his university headmistress Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, dubbing her the alliterative Wicked Witch of the West in flyers, banners, and loudspeaker announcements comparable to those in Nazi Germany. These details resonated with me in this otherwise glitzy Hollywood musical for their parallels to contemporary politics, rising intolerance, and xenophobic scapegoating. And while I was charmed by Erivo's performance and many other aspects of Wicked, I appreciated its thematic heft and timeliness above all. Not knowing how the second half of the story plays out, though I could guess most of it, based on the events that occur in 1939's The Wizard of Oz, I was disappointed to find that Wicked for Good, the conclusion of Universal Pictures' cash cow, not only softens its cautionary tale but also feels less vibrant and rebellious. It plays more like an obligatory set of plot points designed to overlap with The Wizard of Oz. Over the prolonged 138-minute runtime, we meet the Cowardly Lion, learn the lovelorn origin story of the Tin Man, discover how the Scarecrow became a living burlap sack full of straw, and see where the pink-strewn and magicless Glinda, Ariana Grande, got her bubble mobile and wand. Dorothy and Toto show up too, but in a distracting choice, we see only their backs and silhouettes. Screenwriters Halsman and Dana Fox offer less discovery, wonder, and pluck this time around, leaving audiences with a mostly drab tale that offers little joy or laughter. But based on the teary eyes and glimmering smiles in my screening, superfans will probably enjoy Wicked, for good, in part because they know what's coming, have no doubt experienced this story multiple times on stage, and will delight in seeing a cinematic adaptation. However, I found myself struggling with how the story unfolds and how the events lead to a confounding moral compromise. The sequel opens with the Land of Oz in a state of fear-mongering and self-glorification, exploiting laborers and animals to build the yellow brick road in the wizard's honor. "They're never going to stop believing in me," he observes later in a Trumpian remark. "They don't want to." Indeed, some Ozians have swallowed the anti-animal disinformation coming out of the Emerald City. But dissenters say, "This is not the Oz I know." And just like those who fled Hitler's Germany in the 1930s, the animals of Oz resolved to abandon their homeland rather than risk being placed in cages and rendered voiceless, reasoning, "We can't stay here, it's become rotten." To be sure, both political and moral corruption run rampant in Oz. Elphaba's paraplegic sister, Nessa Rose, Marissa Bode, has become a vindictive governor who uses her power to constrain her would-be boyfriend, Buck Ethan Slater, when he plans to leave after realizing that she's become power-mad. The movie involves a convoluted array of mismatched romantic couples. Nessa Rose loves Buck, but Buck loves Glinda, yet Glinda doesn't love Buck. Glinda loves Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, but Fiyero loves Elphaba, and Elphaba loves Fiyero right back. As the song says, love stinks. Meanwhile, Oz and Morrible, rhymes with horrible, target the fugitive Elphaba while putting Glinda on a pedestal, presenting her to Ozians as the bubbly good witch in contrast to her green-skinned counterpart. The tension between the former friends escalates when Elphaba inadvertently ruins Glinda's wedding to Fiyero. The friends fight and, despite Glinda's rather unforgivable and self-obsessed behavior in both movies, soon forgive each other. They eventually team up for a resolution that recalls The Dark Knight, 2008, or rather, since the 1995 book and 2003 Broadway musical came first, Wicked may have influenced Christopher Nolan. Just as Batman arranged things so Gotham would leonize Harvey Dent as a hero and demonize Batman himself as a murderous vigilante, Elphaba volunteers to become the villain, staging her death so Glinda can thrive as the good which they believe Oz needs, for good. Except, even Glinda knows her behavior doesn't qualify as good, yet she's willing to accept that moniker regardless, believing that Ozians are either too stupid or emotionally incapable of handling the moral complexities of the truth. Both also decide to conceal the truth about the wizard, a curious and dramatically unjustified reversal for Elphaba, whose unshakable morality from the first movie now wavers. But their solution merely repeats the problem created by the so-called wizard. In Wicked, Elphaba wanted to expose his lack of magic, she spoke out and was ostracized for it. In the sequel, she compromises her morals with a scheme that replaces an ersatz wizard with a faux witch, Glinda, who also doesn't have any real magic, yet she intends to present herself to Oz as a genuine witch until she can learn. Cue the Who's Won't Get Fooled again, with the lyric "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss." Elphaba and Glinda have replaced one pack of lies with another. Of course, the material sets out to explore moral ambiguities that could arise in a classical fairy tale, complicating notions of good and evil until there's nothing left but ambivalence and equivocation. However, Wicked, for Good presents Elphaba and Glinda's solution as a happy ending, though I found it anything but. After spending nearly 5 hours with these characters, too long, given the stage show's 3-hour runtime, including an intermission, it tracks that Glinda, ever vapid and hungry for attention, would want to rule over Oz. She's superficial and has a desperate need for approval and praise. She wants attention too much to be trusted to make selfless decisions as a leader, inspiring little confidence in her reign. But it's more uncharacteristic for Elphaba to suppress the truth or agree to a plan that deceives Ozians after spending so much energy fighting to expose the wizard. Even more bizarre is a final shot that sees Elphaba, having effectively faked her death, walking into a random CGI desert with Fiyero Scarecrow, apparently to become nomads. I found these choices appropriate in their postmodernism and in their deconstruction of the Wizard of Oz's idealism, but the story is presented with an ill-fitting optimism, given the rather grim conclusion for all. Having shot the two halves back-to-back, director Jon M. maintains a similar imbalance to Wicked between the practical elements and digital ones. Once again, production designer Nathan Crowley builds elaborate, eye-popping sets, costume designer Paul Tazewell adorns the performers in luxurious costumes, and cinematographer Alice Brooks captures this iconic world in bold colors. However, much of their artistry feels neutralized by the oppressive amount of mediocre CGI, from iffy-looking talking animals to panoramic shots of banal digital landscapes. Far too many passages feel like digital filler, obligatory for a studio spectacle. Also lacking are the musical numbers, which register as serious and less inspired than, say, Fiero's Dancing Through Life stunner from the original. But the melodies and replays of Popular and Defying Gravity play throughout, now with a somber tone befitting the bleaker story. Unlike its predecessor, I never felt swept away by Wicked, for good, apart from the occasional acting choice by Erivo or the compelling subplot about Elphaba taking responsibility for her role in creating the flying monkeys. Perhaps it's because the joy of discovering this world and these characters in Wicked is innately more diverting than the narrative downswing of the sequel. Maybe it's because the digital sheen in most scenes makes the film feel unreal, like watching the cast in lavish costumes standing in green screen environments, acting opposite nothing. A lot of the time, it looks like little on-screen is real, and I found it challenging to connect with characters such as the Cowardly Lion, voiced by Coleman Domingo, who looks about as convincing as the felines in Cats, 2019. Maybe if the production hadn't been in such a rush to meet its announced release date, the digital artists would have had more time to polish the movie's characters and landscapes. In any case, the artificial quality of many scenes, coupled with the bafflingly cheerful conclusion, left this critic scratching his head and wondering what all the fuss is about. The songs may not be as catchy this time around, but Wicked, for good really sings where it counts, with the emotional ache of the fractured friendship at the story's core. All the technical marvel remains dazzlingly in place from director Jon M. Chu's first half of Wicked, based on the Broadway musical phenomenon, which came out just 1 year ago. That includes the elaborate production design from Nathan Crowley and the exquisite costuming from Paul Tazewell, both Oscar winners from Part 1. If you enjoyed all of that and hope to see more of it, don't you worry, the darker tone that marks this second half doesn't mean there's an absence of wonder in the wonderful land of Oz. But the real special effects come from the deeply felt performances from Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, as the relationship between Elphaba and Glinda evolves in complicated ways. As we saw in the first film, the green-hued outsider and the pink-clad popular girl wouldn't seem to have much in common, but they truly saw each other as no one else ever had. The way they locked eyes wordlessly on the dance floor was unexpectedly stirring. And because Part 1 laid the groundwork so convincingly, the fact that their bond breaks in Part 2 is that much more meaningful. Previously, on Wicked, Erivo's Elphaba flew off to the skies on her broomstick, singing the soaring, Defying Gravity, which marks the end of Act 1 of the stage production. Winnie Halsman and Dana Fox once again wrote the screenplay, based on Halsman's musical book and Gregory Maguire's novel. During her absence from Oz, Glinda's reign of goodness has taken full effect. It's all colorful and joyful, but, once again, discerning actual lyrics in the big ensemble numbers can be a challenge. The giddiness Glinda exudes when Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, delivers the bubble that becomes her signature form of transportation is a delight, and a great example of Grande's impeccable comic timing and infectious energy. The soft pinks and creams of her Art Deco penthouse suggest the unbothered ethos she's cultivated. Glinda has told herself she's doing the right thing by hitching that bubble to the wizard, Jeff Goldblum, entertainingly unctuous again, despite his obviously authoritarian intentions. This much is clear even before he sings Wonderful, a razzle-dazzle ditty about how it feels good to feel good, truth be damned. While the character of the Wizard of Oz has been around for over a century, watching a populace succumb to a huckster sure hits differently these days. And a flashback to a childhood birthday party, where Scarlett Spears plays the young Glinda in a perfect bit of casting, reveals she's always been a bit of a fraud herself, but has fudged that fact with her unstoppable, try-hard attitude. Jonathan Bailey feels underused here as Prince Fiyero. Let the man show off his musical theater chops, but he conveys a lot through the slightest shift in his facial expression to reveal his skepticism about marrying Glinda and becoming a high-profile figure in her increasingly powerful platform. The floral explosion of their spectacular wedding ceremony reflects Chu's mastery of scale. Fiyero reminds Glinda that they know the true Elphaba, not the vilified figure she's become. How Glinda and Elphaba strive to salvage their friendship while also being pulled apart by society's expectations provides the film's tension and spine. Elphaba figures if everyone assumes she's wicked, she may as well lean into that. The song in which she comes to that realization, No Good Deed, is truly a showstopper, an excellent showcase for Erivo's powerhouse vocals and an impressive visual set piece. Meanwhile, Glinda's big solo number, The Girl in the Bubble, one of two new tunes veteran composer Stephen Schwartz wrote for the movie, gives Grande a chance to dig deep dramatically as her character confronts the choices she's made. The long, fluid camera work from Chu's frequent cinematographer, Alice Brooks, is consistently clever and inventive during this song. If it sounds like this second half is darker than the first, it is, but it's also more effective in its consistency of tone. Wicked was all fun and games until it wasn't, and that sudden shift was jarring. In For Good, we know from the start that we're in more serious territory with the deep strings of John Powell's score as Ozian workers build the yellow brick road. Along those lines, much of this second film focuses on introducing beloved characters and familiar images from the original Wizard of Oz. So if you're into the lore, there are goodies in store for you. Although casting an actor with the stature of Coleman Domingo as the voice of the Cowardly Lion, and then only giving him a couple of lines of dialogue, is a shameful waste. Still, what you'll remember is the way you'll feel at the end, with the duet that gives the film its title. Erivo and Grande find just the right amount of tenderness and sadness with For Good, and that bond between them shines bright once more. Poignant and intimate, it's a legitimate tearjerker. Bring tissues. With Wicked, For Good, the deconstruction of L. Frank Baum's classic 1900 children's novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and its 1939 film adaptation mercifully comes to an end. Beginning with 2024's smash hit Wicked, this big-budgeted two-parter from director Jon M. Chu is based on Stephen Schwartz's 2003 stage musical, which itself was loosely based on Gregory Maguire's 1995 novel. The first film had its moments before falling off in the second half. Wicked, For Good never gets on its feet, becoming a grueling test of your patience and endurance. Wicked, For Good has a plethora of problems that become more pronounced over the course of its endless 137 minutes. In their defense, screenwriters Winnie Halsman and Dana Fox had a lot to wrangle together. But their bloated story crumbles under the weight of the source material's revisionism and reverence for the beloved 1939 film. Chu tries to make something of it, but what he delivers lacks the humor and charm of its predecessor. Even worse, there is no cohesive vision, either narratively or visually. Following the events of the first movie, the emerald-skinned Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, retreats into hiding while the formerly plucky but now drably inert Glinda, Ariana Grande, obliviously does the bidding of the tyrannical wizard, Jeff Goldblum, and his ambitious ally, Madame Morrible, a terribly miscast Michelle Yeoh. But Elphaba's goal of exposing the wizard brings her and Glinda back together, although in ways neither were anticipating. In the world of Wicked, Oz is a land oppressed by the blandest authoritarian regime. Far removed from the benevolent leader in the original story, this Oz is ran by a weakly defined dictator with a special knack for animal cruelty. As for the citizens, they're mostly gullible cattle who eat up every bit of propaganda they're fed. It makes for an Oz that's more draconian than fantastical. Even the iconic yellow brick road is portrayed as the product of destroyed ecosystems and forced animal labor. These changes all work to portray Elphaba as a product of the system, which eventually leads her to become the Wicked Witch of the West. The film is relentless in stressing her victimhood in order to make her a sympathetic crusader against the wizard's tyranny. But it becomes such a driving focus that Chu forgets more essential things such as coherent storytelling and necessary character development. As for Grande, her character takes a big hit in the second film. It's hard to know how the movie wants us to feel about Glinda. She spends much of the film turning a blind eye to the nefarious deeds happening around her. And she gets off with no real sense of reckoning with her own complicity. So we're left with two conclusions: she's either dumb as a post or she's lacks moral courage. Either way, Grande is left to do what she can with an underserved character. And this naturally affects her scenes with Erivo, leaving both actresses struggling to reignite their chemistry from part 1. Even worse is the shortchanging of certain side characters. Take Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, the captain of the Wizard's Guard and the half-baked love interest of both Glinda and Elphaba. And Nessa Rose, Marissa Bode, Elphaba's half-sister who now governs Munchkinland. Both are meant to play significant roles in Elphaba's story, yet huge chunks of their own stories are missing. Both are trapped within horrible storylines, but it's Bailey who's dealt the worst hand, including a hysterically bad love scene that plays like a cheap music video. And if all of that wasn't enough, there is the shoehorning of Dorothy Gale into the story. This is where the retconning and honoring collide the most. Without question, there's the tug of nostalgia with the glimpses we get of Dorothy, despite her face always being obscured. But her presence muddies the already mangled script. And it gets even worse with the absurdly contrived and shockingly shallow attempts at origin stories for the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion. Hampered by one aggravating problem after another, Wicked, for Good is a scattershot sequel that never gets on track. Its story erratically bounces all over the place while throwing in bizarre twists with practically no build-up. And nothing in this world feels fleshed out, especially the characters, whose actions often feel arbitrary rather than purposeful. The clumsiness leads to convolution, making it a difficult movie to sit through. There are some occasionally attractive compositions where the emerald greens collide with the pastel pinks. But the funky cinematography too often makes the wonderful world of Oz look surprisingly fake. And I haven't even mentioned the music, mainly because there's not a memorable song in the entire film. So Erivo and Grande are left showing their spectacular range with songs that leave no lasting impression whatsoever. That's emblematic of Wicked, for Good as a whole. It's a dull and forgettable experience that's much more messy than magical. If I look back on the last 12 months, there may have been one film, outside of Chicken Jockey, that captured the imagination of people in the cinemas. It felt like everyone was holding space for Wicked, as it dominated the box office and broader pop culture. Thanks mainly to it being anchored by two of the best lead actors in the business for a musical film like this, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. But here's the thing, and it's a big one. The choice to end the first film at the traditional intermission moment meant that everything that the general public understood of Wicked was all in that first film, and thus, I was worried about how part 2 would go. I think I was right to be concerned. So, to set the scene, at the end of Wicked, Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, discovered that the wonderful Wizard of Oz, Jeff Goldblum, is nothing but a fraud. Oz and his accomplice Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, needed Elphaba's natural magical abilities, but not if she was a threat. So Elphaba escaped their clutches, but has now been branded the Wicked Witch of the East in a propaganda campaign that stretches across the lands. Everyone now has to live with the consequences of their actions. Glinda, Ariana Grande, always wanted to be in the spotlight, but is she willing to do what it takes to stay there when it means betraying her friends? And will Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, discover his strength before it is too late? The more this film has sat with me, the more the frustrating elements have grown. However, I did want to take some time, right from the start, to champion those elements that do shine. I want to start by championing all the artists who came together to make this film. Wicked is a film that is bombastic down to its DNA, and it only works because everything on set is a colorful explosion. These grand sets give you texture to this universe and allow you to capture the world in frame. The costumes strike a balance, being both fantastical yet grounded in the world. There are a lot of these tonal juxtapositions that have gone into the construction of the film, and it just works. Then, we can't talk about a Wicked film without exploring the strength of the cast, and much like part 1, it is divine to watch. While Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande share less screen time this round, every moment they do is electric. Their charisma is almost the energy that is powering the rest of the film, and it works. The fact that they are almost able to recapture the power of defying gravity is because you believe in their friendship. The musical pieces are still fun to watch. The cast is still a delight. You honestly want to see how it will all play out because it is clear that everyone cares about their roles. Coming into this film, I had a lot of concern, but also some interest. Because the second act of the musical is where the narrative collides with the traditional Wizard of Oz story in compelling ways. Much like a house into a Munchkin village. For me, it was the weaker of the two acts in the original musical. However, that second act was also more flexible with its narrative presentation, which could have given the film a lot more room to play with now that it was its own work. However, those opportunities were not taken, which was the first of several mistakes. The main issue we have here is that when stretching out one narrative into two separate films, it only works if the main crowning moment is in the second part. Dune got away with a part 2 because its crescendo is in the trap they set on Arrakis. For Wicked, unfortunately, its defining moment is defying gravity, which is firmly in part 1. You could pad out the first part to make it its own film, because the audience knows, no matter what they will sit through, they will be rewarded with what they are here for in the end. Act 2 does not have that light on the hill to help pull you along to the end. It is a significant issue I had with the original musical, and it is cast into stark relief with this new adaptation. Thus, you start to see all of the scaffolding that is being used to put things together. Because there is only a slight intermission for the musical, they don't need to remind people of the plot points in Act 1 with multiple flashbacks. Their attempts to find something to recapture the heights of defying gravity with a new song keep getting undermined by the need to stick the musical motif from defying gravity throughout the film, which undermines more than it uplifts. The pacing becomes an absolute mess with some sections dragging on as if we are trying to dance in molasses, and other parts of the film racing by as if the narrative is on a time scavenger hunt trying to collect everything before rushing across the finish line. The decision to split this into two films may have also come at a cost of some of the digital effects in the movie. Two very noticeable blunders jolt you out of the film like a slap across the face. The first was a de-aged character that looks so profoundly uncanny valley that it was quite unsettling, and not in the way the narrative wanted it to be. Thankfully, it is just a brief moment in the film, but when your de-aging is worse than Tron Legacy, which came out over a decade ago, that is a problem. Also, and I am trying to avoid spoilers here, but there is a character creation that felt like they took a 2D texture and slapped it on a character's face. If you have seen the musical, you know who I am talking about. It was so bad that at my screening, the audience burst out in laughter, which was not the emotion the scene was trying to elicit. In a film where the rest of the production was so well put together, it feels like the rush to get the second part ready in just a year had some timing issues. One area where the film has updated its adaptation is in how it explores the tension in the world we see today, as we see fascism on the rise, everywhere. This exploration is there in the original musical but expanded upon in the now two feature-length runtime. Much like Barbie's very surface-level exploration of feminism, the shallow depth of its analysis of fascism is not a problem because it is meant just to be an introduction. However, the way the filmmakers have tried to incorporate these new themes into the original story leaves some awkward juxtapositions. For example, while the animals being a stand-in for minorities was not great in part 1, in this film, the metaphor gets stretched beyond breaking point, with some profoundly odd messaging in one scene, particularly. Then we get story elements like Nessa Rose, Marissa Bode, and Bach's Ethan Slater, forced relationship. Where we get Nessa Rose doing an accidental fascism. Which could have been a fascinating exploration if the narrative had space to explore it. Instead, it only moves her out of the way so it can keep barreling forward. When I reviewed Jon M. Chu's big screen adaptation of the first half of the hit Broadway musical Wicked around the same time last year, I was surprised to find that it had some merit in its performances, and its translation, and its broadening of the source material, given my distaste for both the show and the Gregory Maguire novel it was based on, and the film's many poor directorial choices and visual flourishes. Much of my goodwill has flown out the window like Elphaba whizzing on her broom with the story's second half, titled Wicked, for Good, after the penultimate duet between Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, and Glinda, Ariana Grande, that cements the narrative's core relationship. Lacking on almost every front, Wicked, for Good feels not only less like a self-contained feature than its predecessor, but also more like an afterthought, running parallel to the events of The Wizard of Oz, resulting in one too many self-serving winks and nods, and tying up the story's remaining threads with as little fuss as possible. In other words, it's the cinematic equivalent of This Could Have Been an Email. Set some time after the events of Wicked, for Good finds the powerful Elphaba living in exile as she works to expose the wizard, Jeff Goldblum, for the fraud that he is, while her old-school friend Glinda has been propped up by the wizard and she's university headmistress Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, as Glinda the Good, granting her everything from a fancy but useless wand and a mechanized floating bubble for transportation to make her appear as if she has magic powers she doesn't actually possess. She's engaged to Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, the winky prince who's now captain of the Wizard's Guard, but holding on to lingering feelings for Elphaba even as he's tasked with hunting her down, while Elphaba's sister Nessarose, Marissa Bode, steps into the role of governor of Munchkinland after their father suddenly passes away. In the meantime, the animals, that would be animals possessing the ability to speak as humans do, are driven underground, fighting a losing battle for their civil rights that only Elphaba seems to be comfortable speaking up publicly for. That latter issue in particular played a key role in Wicked, serving to radicalize Elphaba and reveal the wizard for the oppressive ruler that he is. It's all but absent in Wicked, for Good, however, which exhibits virtually no handle on its politics at all, despite containing plenty of potentially thematically invigorating and timely material, from the employment of a charismatic yet talentless individual as a crowd-pleasing leader to distract the masses from their rights being stripped away under their noses, to the use of fiery propaganda to conjure dangerous enemies out of activists, to a politician who chooses to side with the majority, even when she knows that it isn't right. The script, penned again by Dana Fox and Winnie Halsman, who wrote the book for the Broadway musical, plays it safe, toning down the story's content across the board, not just politics, but sex and violence, in a plea for broader appeal and a PG rating. If the key question underlining Maguire's book contemplates the nature of evil and whether people are born wicked or have wickedness thrust upon them, Wicked, for Good expresses little interest in answering that, opting for a black-and-white narrative populated by characters who are clearly either good or bad. Any shades of gray involve playing with audiences' expectations of specific characters familiar from The Wizard of Oz, sympathies for Dorothy, who is tangentially present in the film, although her face is never actually seen, and her new friends, like the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, are cast in different directions after learning the origins of how they got how they are, and the intricacies of the tangled political conflict they've inadvertently become involved in. That flatness carries over to every other aspect of the film, which is almost shockingly lifeless and dull and, like many sequels, much darker than the first installment. It isn't Erivo and Grande's fault, they are powerhouses, but their lack of shared screen time deprives the film of the humor and heart that their enemies-to-friends relationship brought to Wicked. Gone also are the first half's messaging of accepting yourself and others, and taking pride in being different. There's also the simple fact that almost all of the musical's great songs are in the first act of the show. Erivo's show-stopping rendition of No Good Deed is a much-needed wake-up call in the middle of the movie, but most of the other songs are just sort of there, particularly the two new songs written for the movie, No Place Like Home, a solo for Elphaba, and The Girl in the Bubble, a solo for Glinda intended to serve as a sort of awakening for the character. All of that just serves to make the poor blocking and shot compositions of the musical numbers that plagued Wicked even more evident. Chu is so averse, so pulling the camera back to showcase the choreography, and the scores of dancers backing up his leads, and the physicality of his cast, opting instead for choppy edits and medium shots that find the characters awkwardly placed in frames where it's difficult to know where to look. Visually, Wicked, for Good is even less vibrant than its predecessor, and many of the scenes are still weirdly backlit, washing out any color in the production design. Whereas Wicked, while overly long, moved at a decent pace, Wicked, for Good somehow manages to move sluggishly while rushing through plot points that fail to fill out the characters' relationships or grant the story any thematic depth, causing it struggle to justify its existence. Maybe splitting the Broadway show into 2 films, clocking in at over 5 hours long altogether, was a mistake. Maybe, with this crew behind the camera, it wouldn't have made much difference. I'm just going to content myself with the promise this movie's subtitle offers, that this series is over and done with, for good. Wicked, for good cannot match its predecessors. Holy shit, they did it. Sense of surprise, both in terms of Wicked Part 1's overall quality and the extent to which splitting the play into 2 parts turned the first act into a heartbreaking anti-hero origin story. Good is not the enemy of perfect, and Jon M. Chu's second passion of the throp melodrama delivers a high-energy, big-scale recreation of the source material's second half. Whether or not it's as great as Wicked Part 1, Wicked for Good is still very good. Or, more specifically, if I jestfully referred to the last film as a 3-star movie with a 10-star ending, this one is a 3-star movie straight down the line. In terms of these various Part 2 of 2 flicks, it's much closer to Dune Part 2 than a Chapter 2 set months, or years, after Elphaba throptified the not-so-wonderful Wizard of Oz. Wicked for Good picks up with Emerald City's disenfranchised animals suffering ever more. While Elphaba has publicly embraced her role as the Wicked Witch of the West, Glinda has been, not so reluctantly, installed as a propaganda-spewing, or at least narrative-confirming, mouthpiece for the wizard. Her The Girl in the Bubble, an original song, is solid even as it's more a triumph of production design and cinematic trickery than a likely karaoke favorite. There's No Place Like Home poignantly acknowledges the push-pull between staying and fighting or seeking safety elsewhere. It's good enough, and feels organic enough alongside the established tunes, that I didn't initially realize it was the second of 2 newbies. Elphaba does what she can to fight for an animal population and to expose the ruler as a non-magical fraud, even as many of those animals have already given up. Erivo's Glinda struggles with the consequences of her public persona while Fiyero, now captain of the Wizard's Guard, still hopes to find the pariah for whom he has fallen in love. As this would-be heroic trio struggles to balance desire and duty, the grim political status quo continues to bring out the worst in many of those with a vested interest in the current inequity. A perfect storm of tornadoes, tragedy, and earthly trespassers will bring this conflict to a head. All of this unfolds as expected for those with even token awareness of the Wizard of Oz. Even noting the first film's media's residential prologue, which all but spoils the film's finale, there is an aggressive sense of inevitable doom and, as Elphaba wages a righteous crusade that she doesn't really think will succeed, I burn my life to make a sunrise I'll never see, fatalism. The technical elements continue the no expense spared and what a blockbuster used to be quality. Alice Brooks shoots with an eye for showmanship while, alongside Chu, almost metaphorically apologizing for the Blumhouse-budgeted Small Angry Jam and the Holograms movie from a decade ago. Look, you know how I feel about Hollywood giving second chances to properties that didn't click the first time. However, hypocrisy alert, maybe this Jon M. Chu can get real money for Brooks to lens a truly outrageous adaptation? Jeremy Fooster noted on our box office podcast last year that Wicked for Good and Dune Part 2 both served as, paraphrasing, this is what Hollywood is for, proof-of-concept success stories, delivering a mix of quality storytelling and big-screen razzle-dazzle that only Hollywood-sized budgets can allow. Ditto this time around. If the proceedings are less every night is girls' night, and more do you guys ever think about dying, the now more topical downer elements don't make the picture any less entertaining or fun. Moreover, it only serves to enhance Cynthia Erivo's spectacular 2-part blockbuster movie star performance. I'm not going to say she's underrated, since she did get an Oscar nomination last time. Nor will I begrudge Ariana Grande's showier turn garnering most of the free media. The Nickelodeon sitcom star turned pop music icon remains a nuanced delight. But as someone who saw Bad Time at the El Royale is sat slack-jawed, wondering, who the fuck is this, it's worth reiterating just how makes it look easy good Erivo is. Jonathan Bailey also makes a compelling tortured hero/romantic lead. How nice that a mixed-race romantic duo in a mainstream blockbuster actually gets to have sex. At the same time, Marissa Bode clearly relishes playing the kind of complicated villain rarely offered to differently abled actors. Michelle Yeoh gets most of the unapologetically mustache-twirling villainy. Jeff Goldblum's conniving man behind the curtain provides a portrait of evil revealed not through monologues or outbursts but through diabolical deeds. All of the performances are up to par with the material's demands. Like the show, the second act offers a grim, tragic political melodrama that draws on how the characters from Wicked become the characters we know from The Wizard of Oz as emotional melodrama and outright body horror to negate the need for Ender or Hunger Games-style violence. And yeah, what worked on stage is a surprisingly successful blend of kid-friendly fantasy and unapologetic grimdark totalitarian tragedy now operates as a poignant commentary on our stupidly awful present. We'll see if Wicked for Good joins, sight unseen, Zootopia 2 and Avatar, Fire and Ash is a rare non-Warner Bros. Biggie released in 2025 that embraces the challenges of coping with the here and now. Whether or not that remains the case, the irony isn't lost on me that Jon M. is the guy who directed G.I. Joe, Retaliation. That action sequel debuted in 2013 as pure bubblegum action fantasy only to become, alongside Serve and Report and Our Brand is Crisis, among the most prescient mainstream movies of the last 20 years. Hell, things have gotten so bad that the still terrible 1993 Super Mario Bros. Flick now looks scarily prescient. Among the more potent observations is how the wizard notes that those who have been conned would prefer to continue to believe the lie rather than admit they've been swindled. It's not as America in a nutshell powerful as when Barry Pepper's U.S. cavalry officer sides with the bad guys so he can pretend he's still among the good guys in The Lone Ranger, but I digress. It is almost courageous how this second chapter doesn't try to reverse engineer a finale on the level of the first flick's Defying Gravity blowout, since this is telling a different story amid a changed world. Rich in top-tier production value and game actors treating this material as seriously as hoped, Wicked for Good is an old-school Hollywood spectacle. It's a relic of when such investments would be viewed with awe, partially because the theatrical and post-theatrical ecosystem could justify such a measured bet, rather than trepidation. Wicked for Good is, well, it's very good, and that's more than good enough. At its start, Wicked for Good feels more like a Marvel superhero movie than a musical. Sad animals are forced to build the yellow brick road, but then Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, surfs in on her broomstick, rescuing them from the shackles of oppression. We shift to Glinda, Ariana Grande, now deemed the good, and her team of minions and fans, who sing about how goodly she is. Glinda serves as a political distraction from the grim truth. The wonderful Wizard of Oz is a tyrant, hell-bent on stripping the animals of their rights. Elphaba fights to free them. To further ensure oceans don't realize what's really going on, Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, the wizard's press secretary, keeps them focused on Glinda's ensuing nuptials to Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, dreamy as ever, the new captain of the guard. That's what has taken up everyone's time since we last visited Oz in Wicked, Part 1. If that sounds like a lot of crisis, well, it is. One of the complaints about the stage version of Wicked is how rushed Act 2 is. So much happens in those crammed 45 minutes, not to mention the radical shift from the light-hearted tone to the sinister. Wicked for Good isn't as rushed or as convoluted as Act 2 is on stage. But it doesn't fly as far off the ground than Wicked, Part 1 did. Director Jon M. does answer some of the questions that plagued Act 2 of Wicked. We see how fiercely Elphaba is struggling to free the animals, and how they are ready to throw in the towel and jump into the abyss. There's a very heartbreaking scene when Elphaba runs into her former nanny, Dulce Bear, who wishes Elphaba luck in her continued battle as she gets ready to leave. We see how Glinda, a girl with no magical powers, gets around in a giant floating bubble. We learn more about how Elphaba's sister, Nessa, Marissa Bode, is ruling Munchkinland with an iron fist, refusing to let the Munchkins leave without being issued a permit. Nessa's doomed relationship with Bach, Ethan Slater, becomes clearer in light of this, as does Bach's later fury. But Wicked for Good falls short of solving major problems in Act 2. The pacing is off at times, some scenes move at a glacial pace while others race along at breakneck speed. It's still not 100% clear how Dorothy and her companions fully tie into the story of Wicked, especially given that we learn just how connected some of Dorothy's new friends in Oz are to the characters in Wicked. The two new songs, while beautiful, don't add much to the narrative. One takes place during an already dramatically heightened scene. The truth is, unless Chu and his team completely rewrote and structures Wicked, these potholes were bound to happen. It's not from lack of trying. Wicked for Good is a vast improvement on its Broadway inspiration. But let's face it, most of the bangers are in Act 1, and Act I is just a lot more fun. That said, the acting, costumes, and set design of Wicked, for Good are as enchanting as they were in Wicked, Part 1, except for Michelle Yeoh's vocals, but hey, she has admitted that she's not a singer. Chu made her do it anyway. Erivo and Grande are the heart and soul of the film. Erivo's rendition of No Good Deed is particularly powerful. Even though she's only on screen for a short period, Bode is heart-wrenching as Nessa, and Slater is surprisingly frightening as a tortured Bach. Jeff Goldblum more or less plays Jeff Goldblum, but he seems to be having a lot of fun, and that joy is infectious. Adapting a musical to the screen is no easy feat for every Chicago or Dreamgirls. We've had a Dear Evan Hansen, Cats, and Into the Woods. Wicked, for Good has its faults, but it still stands out as one of the stronger adaptations of a musical to film, one that will stand the test of time as a double feature with Wicked, Part 1. And that's worth having a celebration the Glinda way. Sarah Mina Osman is based in Los Angeles. In addition to the arts fuse, her writing can be found in the Huffington Post, Success Magazine, Matador Network, Hello Giggles, Business Insider, and Watch Mojo. She has an MFA in creative writing from the University of North Carolina Wilmington and is working on her first novel. Where the first entry in director Jon M. Chu's exuberant two-parter succeeded in wowing audiences last fall, its more familiar follow-up delivers what we might call the few factor, as in, thank goodness, he didn't blow it. By now, the world has been built, and Chu and company are free to deliver the best defense of which is this side of the crucible, going so far as to improve on the source material in the process, not L. Frank Baum's turn-of-the-century novel, but the hit Broadway musical based on Gregory Maguire's revisionist bestseller, the emotional untold story of how green-skinned Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, was unfairly villainized, and the friendship that eventually redeemed her, with Ariana Grande's sparkling pink Glinda, runs nearly 5 hours in toto, not counting the year-long intermission. Treating the two halves as separate films has effectively served to eventize the Hollywood musical, which looked like an ailing genre until Wicked Part 1 scored $750 million, with so much green to embolden them. Chu and his gifted ensemble returned to the Emerald City, from which Elphaba was freshly exiled, after exposing the wizard, Jeff Goldblum, for the charlatan that he is. Dorothy has yet to appear, which she will, though this enchanted telling is only nominally interested in the mulish farm girl so famously played by Judy Garland. Instead, Wicked focuses on the J.K. Rowling-worthy feud between witches and wizards, whose relative goodness and badness is constantly in flux. As far as oceans are concerned, only Elphaba is evil, though the behind-the-scenes situation is considerably more complicated. The film also supplies fresh origin stories for Dorothy's travel companions, the Cowardly Lion, Scarecrow and Tin Man, which serve to explain their collective animosity toward the so-called Wicked Witch of the West. Good luck to anyone who watches Wicked, for Good without first seeing the earlier film, since Chu picks up right where he left off, throwing audiences smack into a spectacular Emerald City celebration. On stage, the second act unspooled in less than an hour and lacks a song as strong as Defying Gravity, which makes seeing the rushed, plot-heavy segment live a letdown for many, compared with the more well-rounded backstory of how Elphaba became friends with Glinda the Good. The film fixes a common complaint of the show, giving the pair more scenes and songs together in this final stretch, which now feels like a robust tale unto itself. Out of the two witches, only Elphaba has the gift of magic. She also has in her possession the Grimoire, an ancient book of spells that have a way of backfiring, hence Erivo's soul-searching solo, No Good Deed, in which the frustrated Elphaba decides she might as well embrace her reputation for evil. Meanwhile, Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, has turned all of Oz against her, from the Flying Monkeys to Elphaba's sister, Nessa Rose, Marissa Bode. The latter's promotion to public office has unfortunate consequences for animals and munchkins alike, leading to a heartless split with the once affable Bach, Ethan Slater. As Part 2 opens, the iconic yellow brick road is under construction. Elphaba objects to the use of animal labor for the task, swooping in on her broomstick to liberate several beasts of burden. We mustn't forget, the wizard has been treating all of Oz as talking animals as scapegoats, ousting distinguished critters like Peter Dinklage's Dr. Dillamond, as great a goat as they come, from positions of respect. In the film's PG-rated Kristallnacht, elegantly green-clad soldiers round them up the way brown shirts once did the Jews of Europe, which would make the propaganda-producing Morble this world's equivalent of Joseph Goebbels. Such comparisons are no accident, though Wicked even more acutely critiques real-world politics, presenting its wizard as a wise old carny who's fooled his followers with so much blarney, they're too brainwashed to believe when shown the truth. As presented in the film's visually dazzling but unmistakably disillusioned song Wonderful, the wizard's testimony none too subtly resembles a certain huckster-in-chief with a gift for obscuring the lines between fact and fiction, or, as the dreamy Prince Fiero, Jonathan Bailey, more romantically puts it, it's not lying. It's looking at things another way. The observation that leaders are capable of mass manipulation was front and center in the 1939 classic. And yet, co-writers Winnie Halsman and Dana Fox add more than an hour of worthy material to Halsman's Broadway book, plus 2 new songs, while sharpening what such deceptive practices mean to contemporary viewers. Even the idealistic Elphaba seems to agree that commoners can't handle the truth, recognizing that exploiting her unjustly evil reputation can do some good. That's the reason she insists that Glinda do nothing to correct the record after Dorothy does the deed. No spoilers there, as it's not only how the classic movie ends but also where Wicked Part 1 began. Emotionally speaking, the movie's most touching themes involve the durability of friendship, nothing like dropping a house on one's sister to test such a bond, and the virtues of change. Whereas Grande had a relatively one-dimensional role to play in Part 1, Glinda now faces a complex evolution, showing fragility in the new song, The Girl in the Bubble, and something far more nuanced than simple anger when Fiero makes the choice that will cost him his brains. One could argue that the first film was the story of how Elphaba came to be empowered, while this one deals with Glinda's redemption, and yet, neither half works without the full-hearted commitment of both parties. To that end, Erivo also gets an original song, No Place Like Home, which gives fresh meaning to Dorothy's famous mantra, Elphaba doesn't want to go back but forward, to push the unaccepting place she comes from toward a more inclusive future. Among the second film's satisfactions are more detailed accounts of how Scarecrow and the Tin Man came to be cursed, as well as a knockdown, drag-out witch fight. The Art Nouveau style sets and ornate costumes are nothing short of astonishing, though the film relies more heavily on virtual effects, eschewing the techniques that made the blend of practical and virtual elements so seamless last time. The emotions are real, everything else is movie magic, representing where we now stand, at the apex of artificiality, for better or worse. If one had to battle an excessively extended setup in the otherwise spectacular and dazzling first part of Wicked, the similarly joyous second chapter of director Jon M. Chu's adaptation of the Broadway musical, Wicked, for Good, comes with its own fair share of flaws, this time more invasive than an elongated running time providing depth to characterization. Clocking in at roughly 20 minutes shorter than its predecessor, there are aspects here that feel off, mainly with the inevitable conclusion of the Wizard of Oz narrative within the ongoing exploration of friendship and fallout between Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, Cynthia Erivo, in the making, and Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, Ariana Grande. There is no replacing Judy Garland, and there should be no tampering with that classic film's legacy, side-eye to be insulting AI-altered desecration going on at the Sphere in Las Vegas, although that's a conversation for another time, so one understands keeping that story in the background through a wordless Dorothy performance and pop-ups that feel like cameos more than anything. There is also the concern that pushing it further could be even more of a fan service distraction, detracting from the story being told between Elphaba and Glinda. With that said, Jon M. Chu, working from a screenplay by Winnie Halsman and Dana Fox, presumably faithfully adapting the former stage play, and bringing in music by John Powell and Stephen Schwartz, is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Perhaps this just works on stage as a musical, but as a film, while once again vividly colorful and angelically performed with a moving core story, its The Wizard of Oz ties simply feel rushed and clunky. That's without getting into some of the more ugly visual effects for beloved characters such as Tin Man and Scarecrow, touched up with an overabundance of CGI that, more than anything, serves as a reminder that less is more, and that the costumes from the 1939 original were more than suitable in this department. Meanwhile, the cowardly lion comes away unscathed here, not only resembling a real lion but also coming with highly detailed, well, cowardly facial expressions across his every move and line of dialogue, which, again, isn't much. As for the rest of the effects, whether it be winged CGI spy monkeys forced into doing the wizard's, Jeff Goldblum, bidding or the several elaborate costume designs, specifically, Glinda's assortment of pink dresses, or look at the in-construction yellow brick road. The no doubt gargantuan budget was well spent. This is the film where color pops across every inch of a frame, with the numerous costumes and buildings brimming with multiple shades. The often clashing colors make for a splashy, aesthetically delightful look once again. Unquestionably, those elements are doing some heavy lifting on a story that struggles whenever it's time to connect to the Wizard of Oz. There are already quibbles to be had with the characterization of Elphaba's paraplegic sister, Nessa Rose, Marissa Bode, who is now a governor and apparently also on a path of wickedness. On that note, if one takes a shot every time someone says good or wicked, they will be passed out within the first hour, for reasons that, while laid out, also feel a bit forced onto the character. There isn't much room for organic transformation, as the film mainly uses a single big scene for each key character. The point is that it doesn't always click, and the writing's portrayal of Nessa Rose feels like a failure for people with disabilities and is wonkily executed. Fortunately, when the narrative focuses on Elphaba and Glinda, it is markedly more focused, engaging, and emotional, even if it's slightly annoying that key aspects of their respective arcs come down to fighting over Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey. What remains most fascinating is the idea of Oz as a stand-in for America, the supposed land of opportunity, and the wizard as a Trumpian figure who not only lies incessantly, but at one point notes the uncomfortable reality that even if he did reveal his deceptive nature, it wouldn't matter because once people buy into an idea of someone or something, that hold has almost no chance of being broken. It's an observation that rings disappointingly and bleakly true, given the current week America is having as I write this review. There is even a song, of which there are many wonderfully sung and sonically heavenly, beginning with lyrics clearly painting Oz as a metaphor for America, especially considering the ongoing corrupt oppression of those who are different. And while it's true that none of the numbers here compares to Defying Gravity, the musical sequences are once again staged, complete with the occasional aerial or wide-shot perspective from cinematographer Alice Brooks to capture as much of the movement and painstakingly crafted sets as possible. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are also superb again, although this chapter feels more concerned with Glinda as someone stuck between having the adoration, popularity, and status she has always craved from the common folk while also trying to do right by Elphaba, who is proceeding against the wizard and his evil deeds while reckoning with her mistakes and place in such circumstances. Wicked, for good descends from gravity back down to earth, but is still a joyously moving enough, if flawed, finale. Last year's 4K and Blu-ray viewing of 2024's Wicked was one of the better surprises of 2025, and still is probably my favorite watch of last year. And many of us were eagerly awaiting the second act of the play to come out with Wicked, for good. Foregoing the theatrical experience in order to keep my review fresh, I've impatiently walked these long halls, the melodrama, just waiting for the physical release, and now the time is nigh. Again, the melodrama, taking up the plot of the second half of the famed Broadway play, we pick up some time after the events of the last movie. Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, is waging a one-woman war against the despotic Wizard of Oz, doing her best to disrupt his plans for domination over the animals and his own people. Unfortunately, the wizard is winning the war of public opinion, successfully turning the people against Elphaba and driving her back further and further. Glinda, Ariana Grande, does her best to try and aid her friend's fight as best she can, but she has to keep her alliance with the Wicked Witch of the West a secret so that the wizard and his flying monkeys don't lock her up as well. Finally, tiring of the conflict, Elphaba agrees to help the wizard, but only if he agrees to stop attacking the speaking animals in the kingdom and give up his dominion over the flying monkeys. But like everyone expected, the wizard is not one to keep his promises, dashing all hopes of a truce. And to make matters worse, the wizard's sorcerer, Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, ends up killing Elphaba's sister Nessa, Marissa Bode, by dropping a house on top of her, leading up to the inevitable conclusion. Sometimes the world needs a villain, and the best freedom fighter there is needs to step aside and let someone else steer the ship. Last year's review of Wicked was probably my favorite viewing of the year, and Wicked, for good, follows very large footsteps. And for the most part, it actually succeeds. The movie is a near-direct adaptation of the stage play, which means that, much like the play, the second half of the story doesn't live up to the hype that was the first half. And really, it's something I was completely expecting, being that it was baked into the original play. You see, unlike movies, plays are not a three-act story. Instead, they have two distinct halves, and generally the best act is the first one. This has been a studied phenomenon for years in the world of Broadway productions. And just like the play, the truly great parts are heavily front-loaded in the story, meaning that the first film took up the best songs, the most impactful scenes, and the stronger ending. The best part of the movie is that it leans heavily into the conspiratorial nature of the original novel. Pulling heavily from the socio-political leanings of the 90s, it actually feels even more relevant today. Themes of manipulation by the elites, the masses needing an opiate, and being willing to believe outright lies feel eerily familiar in this day and age. And to that effect, it's all the more powerful. That being said, I really do miss some of the darker elements of the novel, especially regarding Galinda's and Elphaba's strained relationship. In the film, it's much more surface level, versus the back-and-forth play that two powerful women had regarding what needed to be done with the wizard. But I digress. The darker take on this film still fits in with the lighter and airier previous film well enough, but adds a nice layering that hits pretty hard in the feels. I especially loved how the Dorothy elements from the classic movie are kept off to the side and intimated, rather than just replaying the same yellow brick road adventure that the 1930s film has already done. Dorothy's face never being shown was a cool effect, and keeps fans from disassociating, as most of us still see Judy Garland's face in that role, no matter how hard we try. That being said, Wicked, for Good is still a very good follow-up to the first film. We get a great performance by Ariana Grande this time, who actually takes center stage over Erivo for once. Erivo still has some absolutely incredible singing, my goodness, that lady has a set of pipes on her, and the introduction of Dorothy, and the realization of who the Tin Man and Scarecrow were was kind of a cool twist I had forgotten about. It's been years since I've seen the Broadway production. My only complaints are the obvious front-loading of the best songs in the first act, first movie in this instance, and the weak ending. I love the play to death, but the ending has always come across as feeling rushed and contrived in a small way, especially the reveal about Elphaba's past in the last few minutes of the movie. But again, these are flaws that are baked into the plot of the play itself, and unless Chu and his writers actually changed up the play, there's no way out of it. Last year's Blu-ray for the first film was nearly perfect, so I had really high expectations for this one, and Universal did not disappoint. In fact, I feel they actually surpassed the encode over the previous film, allowing me to give Wicked, for Good, a perfect 5 out of 5 star rating. Standing out as one of the best films that the Blu-ray format has been able to put out, we head back into Oz with a glorious 4K digital master that was struck from our Alexa 65 cameras, and then fake grain was added back in post-production to give it some texture. And Wicked, for Good, looks weirdly filmic as a result. Most digitally shot films are obvious that they're not actually shot on film stock, but this is one of the better attempts. The light layering of grain looks almost natural, except for a weird grainy shot in the scene where Elphaba and Galinda prepare for Dorothy near the end, and the fine details are impeccable. You can see every little fiber, every little bit of dirt, and every line on the costumes. Colors are absolutely incredible, with a vivid palette that ranges from dark emerald green to bubble gum pink, down to the dreary and dark look of the Castle Kiamoko, which is a really neat design. Absolutely perfect, featuring the same Dolby Atmos track as the 4K UHD disc. Thank you for being one of the good guys, Universal. The film makes its presence felt in the very opening scene of the film. This mix is absolutely rocking, with a heavy emphasis on rich and expansive songs that fill the whole soundstage. The action is bigger and heavier than the previous film, giving rein to some really cool swooshing and fighting sequences thanks to Elphaba and her broom. Directionality is quite impressive, and I literally was catching myself pinpointing directional cues all over the film. One moment you'd hear a monkey scream in the front left, only to hear a rock rattle and fall in the rear of the room. Vocals are crisp and clean as expected, and the balance is perfection. The track does a great job balancing a deep and powerful bass track with the rest of the film, and brings this Atmos track this close to being utter perfection. The second part of the Wicked film, Wicked for Good, was always going to have giant's silver, not ruby, slippers to fill, which is both a testament to the success of its predecessor and commentary on the overarching question: did the movie really need to be turned into 2 films? But the good news is, even though Wicked for Good falls short of the greatness of Part 1, it is still a touching, entertaining film that deserves some gratulation. Director Jon M. once again does a phenomenal job bringing the color-rich world of Oz to the big screen, leveraging Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande's sizzling chemistry and enormous talent to make the action leap off the screen. Of course, there are some overarching issues, including a bloated runtime and new songs being added for no purpose. But overall, Wicked for Good is a magical, emotional conclusion to one of the best musicals of all time. Picking up where we left off in Part 1, this second part starts with Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, disgraced and on the run. The people of Oz believe she is the source of evil behind every bad occurrence, not knowing that it's actually their beloved wizard, Jeff Goldblum, and Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, that are to blame. Elphaba makes appearances throughout the countryside, rescuing beleaguered animals who are being used as manual labor for the construction of the yellow brick road, who knew it was built on the backs of the oppressed. Glinda, Ariana Grande, on the other hand, has fully leaned into the propaganda machine, propping up herself and Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, as the power couple of Oz. But as Elphaba's safety and reputation come under increased peril, the facade starts to break between Glinda and Fiyero, and the two must decide whether they choose power over doing what's right by their friend and their country. Some may see Wicked for Good as a traditional romance, but to me the chemistry between Fiyero and Elphaba is a bit lacking. Even in the stage show, the love triangle is the least interesting dynamic. I instead see this as a love story between 2 friends, Elphaba and Glinda. Their relationship is the beating heart of the film, and because of that, it is critical that there be chemistry between the 2 lead actresses. Erivo and Grande pick up right where they left off from Part 1, and even though their characters are separated for a good portion of the film, each time they find their way back to each other, the scenes are electrifying. On paper, the Wicked story may seemingly be more about Elphaba, but this second part is Glinda's story, and Grande gives the performance of her career. If you thought she was great in the first film, just wait for this. Glinda's character has the biggest character arc in the story, and I was surprised by how much my interpretation of Glinda and the overarching story changed when using film as the medium. Being confronted with Glinda's emotions in focus close-ups, where you can see the hurt and distress conveyed on her face, completely changed my perspective of the character. On stage, with the characters further away, I was less concerned with Glinda's feelings and more happy that Elphaba was finally getting ahead. But watching this all play out on the big screen, with Grande's affecting performance, made me sympathize with Glinda more than I ever expected. In some cases, I even thought Elphaba was being a bad friend. I wish the same could also be said for Michelle Yeoh, but yikes, as good as Yeoh is in so many things, she is miscast as Madame Morrible. It's honestly not her fault, Chu set her up for failure. Yeoh may look the part, and has enough gravitas to make anyone quiver. But casting her alongside such vocal talents as Erivo and Grande, in a role that requires a powerful singer, which she is not, is a disservice for all of us. Wicked for Good features my 2 favorite songs in the musical, No Good Deed and For Good, and those 2 performances do not disappoint. Erivo's No Good Deed absolutely brings the house down, in an iconic 11 o'clock number that is sure to make you jump out of your seat and applaud. The audience in my screening did. The anger and emotion exuding throughout her performance is going to send shockwaves through Hollywood. For Good, on the other hand, is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. It is a soft, emotional ballad of 2 best friends saying goodbye to each other for the last time. In many ways, it felt like Erivo and Grande also saying goodbye to each other and their characters. Unfortunately, Wicked for Good decided to throw in a few new songs that I did not care for at all. I am admittedly a purist, and once I love something I do not want any major changes made. Don't ask me about the Moulin Rouge Broadway show, it's a sore subject. These new songs don't add much to the story, nor did they really seem to have much of a purpose other than to kill time in an already long film. I don't think they are needed, and they don't have the same vibe and melody as the songs from the original production, which makes them stand out. To answer my earlier question, did Wicked need to be split into 2 movies? Probably not. But to be honest, the first film is so good, I don't know what I would have taken out. Maybe Wicked should have instead been a 3.5-hour magnum opus, but whose attention span is enough for something like that? The most important part is that both films are entertaining and promote a message of inclusion and kindness, something we probably all could use a bit more of these days. At its start, Wicked, for Good feels more like a Marvel superhero movie than a musical. Sad animals are forced to build the yellow brick road, but then Elphaba, Cynthia Erivo, surfs in on her broomstick, rescuing them from the shackles of oppression. We shift to Glinda, Ariana Grande, now deemed the good, and her team of minions and fans, who sing about how goodly she is. Glinda serves as a political distraction from the grim truth. The wonderful Wizard of Oz is a tyrant, hell-bent on stripping the animals of their rights. Elphaba fights to free them. To further ensure Oceans don't realize what's really going on, Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, the Wizard's press secretary, keeps them focused on Glinda's ensuing nuptials to Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey, dreamy as ever, the new captain of the guard. That's what has taken up everyone's time since we last visited Oz in Wicked, Part 1. If that sounds like a lot of crisis, well, it is. One of the complaints about the stage version of Wicked is how rushed Act 2 is. So much happens in those crammed 45 minutes, not to mention the radical shift from the light-hearted tone to the sinister. Wicked, for Good isn't as rushed or as convoluted as Act 2 is on stage. But it doesn't fly as far off the ground than Wicked, Part 1 did. Director Jon M. does answer some of the questions that plagued Act 2 of Wicked. We see how fiercely Elphaba is struggling to free the animals, and how they are ready to throw in the towel and jump into the abyss. There's a very heartbreaking scene when Elphaba runs into her former nanny, Dulce Bear, who wishes Elphaba luck in her continued battle as she gets ready to leave. We see how Glinda, a girl with no magical powers, gets around in a giant floating bubble. We learn more about how Elphaba's sister, Nessa, Marissa Bode, is ruling Munchkinland with an iron fist, refusing to let the Munchkins leave without being issued a permit. Nessa's doomed relationship with Bach, Ethan Slater, becomes clearer in light of this, as does Bach's later fury. But Wicked, for Good falls short of solving major problems in Act 2. The pacing is off at times, some scenes move at a glacial pace while others race along at breakneck speed. It's still not 100% clear how Dorothy and her companions fully tie into the story of Wicked, especially given that we learn just how connected some of Dorothy's new friends in Oz are to the characters in Wicked. The 2 new songs, while beautiful, don't add much to the narrative. One takes place during an already dramatically heightened scene. The truth is, unless Chu and his team completely rewrote and structures Wicked, these potholes were bound to happen. It's not from lack of trying. Wicked, for Good is a vast improvement on its Broadway inspiration. But let's face it, most of the bangers are in Act 1, and Act I is just a lot more fun. That said, the acting, costumes, and set design of Wicked, for Good are as enchanting as they were in Wicked, Part 1, except for Michelle Yeoh's vocals, but hey, she has admitted that she's not a singer. Chu made her do it anyway. Erivo and Grande are the heart and soul of the film. Erivo's rendition of No Good Deed is particularly powerful. Even though she's only on screen for a short period, Bode is heart-wrenching as Nessa, and Slater is surprisingly frightening as a tortured Bach. Jeff Goldblum more or less plays Jeff Goldblum, but he seems to be having a lot of fun, and that joy is infectious. Adapting a musical to the screen is no easy feat for every Chicago or Dreamgirls. We've had a Dear Evan Hansen, Cats, and Into the Woods. Wicked, for Good has its faults, but it still stands out as one of the stronger adaptations of a musical to film, one that will stand the test of time as a double feature with Wicked, Part 1. And that's worth having a celebration the Glinda way. I have always been honest about my opinions on the stage version of Wicked. The show is too top-heavy, making for an anticlimactic second act. The latter half never feels like it reaches the heights of its first act. So when Universal originally announced the Wicked films would be split into 2 parts, I was incredibly worried. While separating them gives the first part, Act 1, its moment to truly shine, making for debatably the greatest musical adaptation of all time, I was worried it would make the story flaws of the second act stand out all the more. As much as my love for Wicked, Part 1 made me believe they could pull from the book and adjust some of the issues in Act 2, unfortunately, I found myself, again, thinking the second half was lackluster. Don't get me wrong, I still believe and stand by everything I said about Wicked, Part 1. In many ways, Wicked, for Good feels like an extension of everything that worked so well in its predecessor. The vocal performances are fantastic, the production design is, again, breathtaking, and the costumes may be even better than the first. You can tell the creative team not only brought us to life but did so in a way that makes both films feel distinct. The only good thing about the story is gives this uber-talented cast more to do, and they kill it. Ariana Grande takes the comedically driven performance in the first film and brings a complicated edge to Glinda in Wicked, for Good. Cynthia Erivo plays more of the same as she did in the first, but she's still great nonetheless. Together, the two elevate the film beyond its structural weaknesses. Regardless of my issues, I can confidently say most people who either enjoyed the first film or are fans of the original stage adaptation will be pleased. At the end of the day, if you squeeze the 2 movies together, Wicked, Part 1 and Wicked, for Good make for what is one of the best stage-to-film adaptations of all time. They brought to life a musical that many thought could be nearly impossible to do. Not only did they adapt it effectively, but they also created a phenomenon that will last a generation. I guess we can call it Meta Monday, because things are about to get a bit meta. In my review of Wicked, for Good, I have no choice but to talk about reviews of Wicked, for Good. This is something I usually avoid like the plague. I'm an entertainment editor with opinions, and it's not my job to call out other entertainment editors with opinions. But I'm going to break my own rule here. I feel a very strong need to address the haters. You're 100% wrong about Wicked. And this isn't the first time. Wicked, for Good has finally arrived in theaters and, as we all know, it's the second half of a movie musical that is based on a stage musical that is based on a book that is a spin-off of a classic book/movie musical. Phew. And for those using their platforms to take down the new movie, allow me to share a little reminder: Wicked on Broadway got horrible reviews. Wicked, which is still running at the Gershwin Theater in NYC, opened in October 2003, and the reviews were not kind. I'll never forget the New York Times headline, "There's Trouble in Emerald City." But mega fans and New York City audiences have proven for the last 22 years, the reviews were wrong. I thought it then, and I especially think it now. For the record, I almost exclusively disagree with the Times' snarky theater reviews, see, Dear Evan Hansen, but that's neither here nor there. And now, with the arrival of the conclusion of the epic on-screen Wicked adaptation, the reviews, from critics at least, have been mixed. One particular headline called the film very, very bad. But once again, the fans, myself included, have different thoughts on the matter. One need only look at the Rotten Tomatoes ratings. Critics have the movie at 70% while audiences have it at a whopping 95%, to see that history might just be repeating itself. The follow-up film is great. In particular, the last 20 minutes of the movie are epic and intimate, emotional and satisfying. But the full second act of Wicked delivers in a powerful and effective way. Ariana Grande is the true star this time around. Cynthia stole the show more in the first half, though she is still incredible in Part 2. Grande's Glinda undergoes the most tragedy, heartbreak and growth in the film, and her portrayal of the Pink Witch is nuanced and Oscar nomination worthy. I even enjoyed her new solo number. I'm usually not a fan of adding new songs to movie musical adaptations, The Girl in the Bubble. I'm sure the song will also be nominated come awards season. The film is darker than the first half, but there is still plenty of fun for us fans as there are way more tie-ins to the original Wizard of Oz story. We finally get the tornado and the arrival of Dorothy, we get the backstory of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, we discover how the wizard became so wonderful, at least in the eyes of Oceans. Each of these elements, which are amplified from the stage version, add to the fun and magic of the film. And, like in the stage version, I'm glad we never see Dorothy's face, it isn't her story after all. The callbacks to the first movie are also satisfying. For example, the wizard's late-in-the-film realization, provided courtesy of Glinda, is a doozy, and the return of Elphaba's childhood nanny Dulcibert pulls at the heartstrings. Whether or not all of the reviews have been positive, the movie is a must-see. And I'm clearly preaching to the choir here as Wicked, for Good had a massive $150 million opening weekend. Perhaps another 22 years from now, we'll all be able to look back on the very bad reviews and laugh. The stage show defied gravity critics then, and the film is doing the same now. The follow-up film is great. In particular, the last 20 minutes of the movie are epic and intimate, emotional and satisfying. But the full second act of Wicked delivers in a powerful and effective way. Ariana Grande is the true star this time around. Cynthia stole the show more in the first half, though she is still incredible in part 2. Grande's Glinda undergoes the most tragedy, heartbreak and growth in the film, and her portrayal of the Pink which is nuanced and Oscar nomination worthy. I even enjoyed her new solo number. I'm usually not a fan of adding new songs to movie musical adaptations, The Girl in the Bubble. I'm sure the song will also be nominated come awards season. The film is darker than the first half, but there is still plenty of fun for us fans as there are way more tie-ins to the original Wizard of Oz story. We finally get the tornado and the arrival of Dorothy, we get the backstory of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, we discover how the wizard became so wonderful, at least in the eyes of Oceans. Each of these elements, which are amplified from the stage version, add to the fun and magic of the film. And, like in the stage version, I'm glad we never see Dorothy's face, it isn't her story after all. The callbacks to the first movie are also satisfying. For example, the wizard's late-in-the-film realization, provided courtesy of Glinda, is a doozy, and the return of Elphaba's childhood nanny Dulcibert pulls at the heartstrings. Whether or not all of the reviews have been positive, the movie is a must-see. And I'm clearly preaching to the choir here as Wicked, for Good had a massive $150 million opening weekend. Perhaps another 22 years from now, we'll all be able to look back on the very bad reviews and laugh. The stage show defied gravity critics then, and the film is doing the same now. Going into Wicked last year, my main concern was the seemingly bloated running time of the first of 2 stage-to-screen adaptations of the smash Broadway musical. The first film clocked in at roughly the time it would take to see the live show, and it was only half of the story. Some 160 minutes later, I found myself fully immersed in this reimagined world of Oz. It was full of energy and life, and I was ready and waiting for my return trip. But after sitting through a screening of Wicked, for Good, which opens in theaters Friday, I couldn't wait for it to end. It's dark, gloomy, and utterly lacking in mirth. It's difficult to believe the same team made both movies, which they filmed concurrently. That, plus it's actually 23 minutes shorter than the first, yet comes across as a seemingly endless slog. Based on the 1995 novel Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, the 2003 musical take wowed audiences from the very beginning. It retells the classic tale through the eyes of schoolmates Elphaba Throp, Cynthia Erivo, and Galinda Upland, Ariana Grande, a pair of friends/rivals who ultimately become the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda the Good. Wicked, the film, offers a series of terrific songs and eye-popping dance sequences that culminate with the show's signature tune, Defying Gravity, the rare modern Broadway number that found success beyond the stage. Wicked, for Good, meanwhile, comes across like a bad hangover, with depressed and depressing characters and situations and one of the bleakest happy endings around. The wonderful Wizard of Oz, Jeff Goldblum at his Jeff Goldblumiest, has transformed the land into an authoritarian state with the help of sorceress Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, and his army of enslaved winged monkeys. Still, Galinda is poised to marry a prince, Fiyero Tigalar, People magazine's current sexiest man alive, Jonathan Bailey, a move she hopes will inspire the people of Oz. As for Elphaba, she's become public enemy #1 thanks to her efforts to free the aforementioned flying monkeys and all of the other animals the Wizard of Oz has attempted to silence. The second act of a musical should, in theory, build on the strengths of the first and bring the story together in a satisfying and timely manner. Wicked, for Good instead drags things out with lengthy and repetitive scenes. The songs aren't as strong either, and the two new ones add little to the proceedings. While the source material for all of this is definitely not for kids, the musical and the films in particular are marketed toward a wide audience of all ages. But parents should be warned that Wicked, for Good may be too dark and mature for some youngsters. At times, it's even scary. For unknown reasons, director Jon M somehow makes two sequences of liberation utterly joyless. Erivo and Grande make the most of what they've got. Erivo is a magnetic persona with a magical voice, and she shines through the muck. And just like in the first installment, Grande knows her assignment and imbues Glinda with the perfect combination of charm and a deceiving aura of empty-headedness. Also, the film's witty and cutting portrayal of Dorothy Gale offers some much-needed laughs. Director Jon M pulls off quite a trick with this manageably proportioned second half to the epic musical prequel myth inspired by The Wizard of Oz, and based, of course, on the hit stage show. It keeps the rainbow-colored dreaminess and the Broadway show tune zinginess from Part 1, and we still get those periodic, surreal pronouncements given by the city's notables to the diverse folk of Oz, those non-player characters crowding the streets. But now the focus narrows to the main players and their explosive romantic crises, essentially through two interlocking love triangles: Glinda the Good, Elphaba the Wicked and the Wizard, and Glinda, Elphaba and Prince Fiero, the handsome young military officer with whom both witches are not so secretly in love, as well as possibly having feelings for each other. Jeff Goldblum is excellent as the Wizard, who pretty much becomes the Darth Vader of Oz, a slippery carnival huckster who is realizing that his seedy charm is corroding his soul. Jonathan Bailey pivots to a much more serious, less campy, more passionate prince, and Ariana Grande is, as ever, delicate and doll-like as Glinda, though with less opportunity for comedy. But the superstar among equals is Cynthia Erivo, bringing her black belt screen presence to the role of Elphaba, and revealing a new vulnerability and maturity. Elsewhere, Marissa Bode returns as Nessa Rose, Elphaba's wheelchair-using half-sister, Ethan Slater as Bach, the Munchkin working as her servant, and Michelle Yeoh brings stately sweetness to the role of the Wizard's private secretary Madame Morrible. We finished the last movie wondering what on earth happens when the action has to come up against the narrative present, i.e., how the prequel would dovetail with what we know of the actual Wizard of Oz film. If Elphaba's perceived evil is just patriarchal society demonizing her differentness, then how are they going to play her final embrace of out-and-out wickedness? And if Glinda repudiates her, will that just look heartless? Well, the film manages all this with a great deal of tragicomic brio. Slightly odder is the tangential appearance of Dorothy herself, carried into Oz in her Kansas shack on a whirlwind, an event that kickstarts the final act. Her three eventual companions, the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man and the Scarecrow, all get, in their various ways, little origin myth-type backstories like villains in the Marvel or DC universes. Each little reveal in fact reminded me of Robin's emergence in The Dark Knight Rises. But the Scarecrow's story, which you might guess a few minutes before it happens, is weirdly muddled and deferred, and it isn't clear how or why the Scarecrow is lacking a brain in the way the Lion and Tin Man are lacking courage and a heart. It's tangled and a bit bewildering, but then so is the original film, in which we never know whether to believe in the Wizard's final benediction. But what a performance from Erivo! It is genuinely moving when the prince has to convince Elphaba what we, the audience, have always known, that she is beautiful. By all accounts, this is the much more difficult half of the story to pull off, as it's where the musical in particular gets much denser and incorporates many more direct elements from The Wizard of Oz. Unfortunately, that difficulty rears its ugly head in Wicked, for Good. As ambitious as this movie is for tackling already unwieldy source material, those ambitions ultimately don't pay off. Sometime after Elphaba Throp, Cynthia Erivo, Pinocchio, is labeled the Wicked Witch for defying the Wizard of Oz, Jeff Goldblum, Jurassic Park. She's launched many an assault on Oz to free its subjugated animal civilians. Meanwhile, Glinda the Good, Ariana Grande, is the face of Hope in Oz despite her continuing love for Elphaba as a friend. The escalating war leads to attacks and fallout on all sides, which soon brings in a farm girl from Kansas who now plays a pivotal role in ending the conflict for good. This film, directed by Jon M. Screenplay by Winnie Halsman. Based on Wicked B. Produced by Marc Platt. Starring Ariana Grande. Edited by Myron Kirstein. Music by John Powell. Production companies Universal Pictures. Distributed by Universal Pictures. Release dates November 4, 2025. Running time 137 minutes. Countries United States. Language English. Budget $150 million. Box office $540.8 million.